Amarachi lived in Nsukka, a small but busy town where dreams were often bigger than opportunities. Every morning before the sun rose, she sat by her old sewing machine, stitching clothes for neighbors and students. The machine rattled, but her hands moved with skill and patience. Sometimes she sewed until her fingers ached, yet she never complained. In the evenings, she carried her books to the university, sitting at the back of the class, determined to learn something new. She was not just working for today, she was working for a future she could almost see. Every naira she earned, no matter how small, went into a wooden box she kept carefully under her bed. It wasn't just a box, it was her treasure chest, her silent promise to herself. She would often open it, count the notes and whisper, "One day this will be my shop. My name will be on the signboard, and people will come from far to wear my designs." That thought gave her strength even on the hardest days. Her parents often told her she was hardworking, and she believed they were proud of her. Whenever she came home late from class, tired but smiling, she felt certain that all her efforts would one day bring joy to her family. She respected them deeply and trusted they wanted what was best for her. She never imagined that the same hands she loved and honored would one day take away the very dream she had been building, coin by coin. The news came like fire in the wind. Obianuju, Amarachi's younger sister, had gotten engaged to a wealthy businessman. The whole house exploded with joy. Their mother clapped her hands and shouted praises. Their father's chest swelled with pride, and neighbors soon gathered to congratulate the family. Songs filled the compound, and Obianuju walked around glowing like a queen, her ring flashing in the sunlight. Everyone said she was lucky, that she was about to marry into a life of riches and comfort. From that moment, the family's world revolved around the wedding. Their mother insisted it must be the grandest wedding Nsukka had ever seen. "People will talk for years," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. Their father nodded, declaring, "This is our chance to show that our family is not small. We will do it bigger than anyone expects." Lists were made, fabrics were chosen, food suppliers contacted. Every corner of the house echoed with talk about decorations, music, and the number of cows that would be slaughtered. Amarachi hugged her sister tightly and whispered congratulations. She truly wished Obianuju happiness, but deep inside, her chest felt heavy. She knew weddings cost money, huge amounts of money, and their family was not rich. She watched as her parents spent hours talking about hiring musicians from Enugu, renting a hall that could hold hundreds, and buying imported wine to impress the guests. The more she listened, the more her heart sank. At night, while others laughed and planned, Amarachi sat quietly at her sewing table, her mind running in circles. She could not stop thinking about her wooden box under the bed, the box holding her dream, the money she had saved through sleepless nights of sewing and studying. She prayed silently that no one would think of it. That box was her future, her chance to stand on her own. Yet, the way her parents' voices grew louder with grand plans, the way they looked at Obianuju as if she was the family's shining star, made Amarachi uneasy. Still, she kept her fears to herself. She told herself that her parents knew what they were doing, that they would never touch her savings. She wanted to believe they saw her sacrifices, her struggles, and her quiet victories. So whenever Obianuju danced around, showing off her ring and talking about the glamorous life ahead, Amarachi forced a smile. "I'm happy for you," she would say, even when her voice trembled. But inside, she couldn't shake off the thought that the wedding was becoming bigger than love. It was becoming a show, a parade for the town. And Amarachi, standing in the shadows of her sister's spotlight, felt an invisible fear growing stronger with every passing day. She prayed she was wrong, but her heart whispered that something was coming, something that could shatter everything she had been working for. That evening, Amarachi walked home tired but hopeful. She had just finished a long day, stitching clothes for neighbors, attending her lectures, and taking notes she would later review by candlelight. As she entered her small room, she felt a sudden urge to open her wooden box. It was something she did often, just to remind herself that her sacrifices were not in vain. That little box carried her dreams, her struggles, and her future. She bent down, slid it out from under the bed, and opened it. Her heart froze. The notes were gone. The coins were gone. The box was completely empty. For a moment, she thought she was imagining things. She rubbed her eyes, checked again, even lifted the box upside down, hoping money would fall out. Nothing. Her chest tightened as panic spread through her body. Her hands shook violently as she ran to the sitting room. "Mama, Papa," her voice cracked. "Where is my money? My box, it's empty." Her mother barely looked up from the fabric she was measuring for the wedding. "Oh, that," she said casually, as if it was nothing. "We took it. We needed it for your sister's wedding. Do you want people to laugh at us? This family must not look poor." The words cut through Amarachi like a blade. She staggered back, gripping the wall for support. Her voice trembled, almost breaking. "Mama, Papa, that was my life savings. I worked for years, every night, every morning to gather that money. How could you just take it?" Her father's face hardened. "Enough of this noise, Amarachi. Do you not understand? This wedding is for the honor of the whole family. One day your sister's marriage will benefit us all. Stop thinking only of yourself." Her eyes filled with tears as her knees weakened. She dropped to the floor, shaking her head in disbelief. "Selfish. You call me selfish? I have been working, suffering, sewing until my hands bled, saving every naira. Not for parties, not for clothes, but for my future. And you took it, all of it, for one day of celebration." But her mother didn't soften. She simply waved her hand dismissively. "You will survive. You're strong. This is for the family's dignity." Amarachi sat on the cold floor, tears rolling down her cheeks, her body trembling as if the ground had opened beneath her. She had trusted them, respected them, believed they wanted the best for her. And now, with one cruel decision, they had crushed her dreams and told her she should be grateful. That night, while laughter and wedding songs filled the compound, Amarachi stayed in her room, staring at the empty wooden box. It was more than money that had been stolen. It was her trust, her hope, and the years of sacrifice she had poured into a future that suddenly felt like it had been snatched away forever. Amarachi could not hold the pain in her chest. The moment she discovered her money was gone, her whole world seemed to collapse. She stood before her parents, her voice trembling, her tears already falling. "Papa, Mama, how could you do this to me? That money was all I had. It was my future. I worked day and night for it. Why would you take it without even asking me?" For a second, she thought maybe they would realize how much it hurt her. Maybe they would soften and explain, maybe even apologize. But instead, her father's voice thundered across the room, sharp and cruel. "Enough, Amarachi. Do not speak as if you are bigger than this family. You should be grateful we are using it for family honor. Do you want people to laugh at us on the wedding day? Do you want your sister's marriage to look small? One day her marriage will help us all. Stop being selfish." The words hit Amarachi harder than a slap. Selfish. She stared at her father with wide, tearful eyes, hardly able to believe what she had just heard. All her life she had given, her time, her strength, her sleepless nights, to help this family. She had denied herself new clothes, fine shoes, and even proper meals, just so she could save for her dream. And now, the same parents she respected had not only stolen her savings but called her ungrateful for crying over it. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Papa, Mama, all I ever wanted was to make you proud. I thought if I worked hard, if I built something for myself, you would be happy. But you don't even see me." Her father's eyes remained cold. "This is not about you, Amarachi. It is about the family. Learn to sacrifice for others." Amarachi broke. The tears poured freely down her face as she fell onto her knees, her voice cracking with pain. "But Papa, I have been sacrificing. Every single day. Sewing until my fingers bled, studying until my eyes burned. And I did it quietly. I never complained. I saved because I wanted a future not just for me but so I could also help this family one day. And now, you take it away and tell me I should be grateful." Her mother looked away, pretending not to hear her cries, busying herself with more wedding plans. The silence from her was just as heavy as her father's harsh words. That night, Amarachi lay on her bed, her pillow soaked with tears. It wasn't just the money that broke her. It was the realization that the people she trusted most didn't believe in her dreams, didn't value her sacrifices, didn't even see her pain. She hugged the empty wooden box to her chest, feeling as though her heart had been ripped open. The betrayal was louder than the wedding songs outside, and it would haunt her far longer. The days before the wedding were the busiest Amarachi had ever seen. The compound was filled with relatives, neighbors, and friends coming in and out, carrying fabrics, decorations, and food supplies. Music played almost every hour, laughter echoed, and everyone seemed to be caught up in the excitement. But in the middle of it all, Amarachi moved quietly, like a shadow. Her mother handed her bundles of fabric and said, "You will sew the dresses for the bridal train. No one else can do it better than you." Amarachi wanted to protest, wanted to remind them that she had already lost everything she saved, but the words died in her throat. She simply nodded and carried the fabric to her little sewing machine. From morning till late at night she worked, measuring, cutting, stitching, her fingers sore, her back aching. Yet no one offered her thanks or even a kind word. It was as if her skill was expected, her labor owed. Meanwhile, Obianuju walked around glowing with pride. She tried on jewelry, adjusted her geli in the mirror, and showed off her shoes that came all the way from Lagos. Guests surrounded her, praising her beauty and her luck. Amarachi would glance at her sister sometimes, her heart torn in two. She loved Obianuju, but each compliment given to her felt like another reminder that Amarachi's own sacrifices meant nothing. At night, when the compound grew quiet and the guests had gone, Amarachi sat alone in her room. She pressed her aching hands together and looked at the empty wooden box under her bed. Tears slipped down her face as she whispered, "Why do my dreams never matter? Why am I always the one to give, but never the one to be seen?" She cried silently into her pillow, careful not to let anyone hear. The wedding day finally arrived. The house was filled with music, cars lined the street, and people came dressed in their finest clothes. Obianuju looked like royalty in her gown, sparkling from head to toe. Their parents beamed with pride, welcoming every guest with wide smiles. Amarachi dressed herself simply, wearing one of the gowns she had sewn, though no one paid attention to her. She walked into the crowd quietly, her faint smile hiding the storm inside her heart. All day she served, she smiled, she stood in the background while others danced and celebrated. No one noticed her red eyes or the way her hands shook slightly as she clapped for her sister. She carried herself with grace, but inside, her heart was breaking into pieces. Still she stayed. She refused to let her pain spoil her sister's joy. Even though she felt invisible, even though her dreams had been buried under the weight of family pride, Amarachi chose silence. Her smile was small, but it was the only shield she had against the world that refused to see her worth. The wedding day in Nsukka was like nothing the town had ever seen. Bright canopies covered the compound, drums beat loudly, dancers shook the ground with their steps, and the smell of jollof rice and roasted meat filled the air. Cars lined the street, and everyone who mattered was there. Guests were amazed by the grandeur, sparkling decorations, expensive fabrics, and music that carried into the night. All eyes were on Obianuju, who looked like a queen in her white gown. Her jewelry glistened in the sun, her smile was wide, and people kept saying, "She is the most beautiful bride Nsukka has ever seen." Their parents walked proudly beside her, smiling at every compliment. Their father's voice was loud with pride as he told guests, "This is my daughter, the wife of a great businessman." Their mother held Obianuju's hand like she was carrying gold. Everywhere Amarachi turned, she heard only her sister's name being praised. But as Amarachi walked quietly among the crowd, her simple gown blending into the background, she noticed the way eyes slid past her. Some relatives whispered, thinking she would not hear, "That must be the elder sister. Look at her, so thin, so tired. You wouldn't even know they are related." Another voice added, "She looks like a servant today. Obianuju is the real star." The words cut Amarachi like a knife. She lowered her eyes, pretending not to hear, but her heart was bleeding. She had sewn many of the gowns the guests were wearing, yet not a single person mentioned her talent. Instead, they talked about her tired face, her lean body, as if her struggles had made her invisible. When she tried to greet her parents, they brushed past her quickly, rushing to attend to important guests. Their smiles and laughter were reserved only for Obi. To them, Amarachi was just another body in the crowd, not the daughter who had given up everything. She stood on the side, clapping faintly when her sister danced, but no one noticed her tears hiding behind her smile. At one point, she caught her reflection in a mirror placed near the entrance. For a moment, she barely recognized herself, the dark circles under her eyes, the sadness weighing on her shoulders. She thought about her empty wooden box, the nights of silent tears, the dreams she had buried so her family could shine. And now, even here in front of everyone, she was nothing more than a shadow. Still, Amarachi held her head up. She refused to let them see her break. She clapped when others clapped, she danced a little when the music played, but inside she whispered, "One day they will remember me. One day I will not be invisible." The celebration roared on, but Amarachi stood quietly at the edge of it all, humiliated, heartbroken, yet holding on to a fragile hope that her story was not over. The wedding was alive with music and color. Guests filled every corner of the compound, their laughter mixing with the drums and trumpets. Women twirled in beautiful gowns, their fabrics shining under the sun. In the middle of the crowd was Madame Kem, a well-known fashion entrepreneur from Enugu. She was a woman people admired, not just for her wealth but for her sharp eye for talent. Wherever she went, people noticed her presence, and on that day, she noticed something others overlooked. As she moved among the guests, Madame Kem's eyes lingered on the bridal train. The gowns were stunning, each one perfectly cut and carefully stitched. Even the tiniest details, the neat hems, the fitted waists, the matching designs, showed a hand that understood fashion deeply. She leaned closer to one of the guests and asked, "Who made these dresses? They look so professional." The woman smiled proudly. "Oh, it was Amarachi, the bride's elder sister. She sews well, but she is just a local seamstress." Madame Kem's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Just a local seamstress," she repeated softly. Her eyes scanned the crowd until she found Amarachi, standing at the edge of the celebration in a simple gown she had also sewn herself. Unlike her sister, she was not surrounded by admirers. She stood quietly, clapping when others clapped, smiling faintly, though her eyes betrayed a heaviness that only someone observant could see. Intrigued, Madame Kem watched more closely. She saw the way people brushed past Amarachi as if she were invisible. She noticed how her parents hardly looked at her, giving their full attention to Obi. She caught the whispers of relatives comparing the two sisters, one radiant and celebrated, the other overlooked and tired. Yet, despite it all, Amarachi stood with quiet dignity, never causing a scene, never letting her pain spill into the joy of the day. At one point, Madame Kem walked up to Amarachi herself. "My dear," she said warmly, "these gowns are beautiful. Did you make them?" Amarachi hesitated, her smile weak. "Yes, ma. I worked on them." "They are excellent," Madame Kem replied, her tone firm and impressed. "You have a gift." For the first time that day, Amarachi's eyes flickered with a small spark of light, though quickly hidden again. She nodded politely, whispering, "Thank you, ma." But Madame Kem could see it, the forced smile, the sadness hiding beneath her calm voice, the exhaustion that came not just from sewing but from being unseen. The celebration carried on with noise and dancing, but Madame Kem remained thoughtful. She had seen many talents in her life, but she had also learned to see pain behind smiles. And in Amarachi she saw both, the hands of a true designer and the heart of a young woman crushed by those who should have lifted her up. Quietly, Madame Kem made a decision in her heart. This girl would not remain invisible forever. The wedding reception was in full swing. Music filled the hall, plates of food and bottles of wine were passed around, and the guests danced joyfully in their fine clothes. Laughter rose above the drums, and Obi continued to shine in the middle of it all, her beauty praised at every corner. Their parents walked proudly from table to table, their smiles wide as they accepted congratulations. To them the day was perfect, until Madame Kem stood up. She had been quiet most of the day, observing everything, but when she rose, her presence drew attention. Conversations slowed, the music softened, and people turned their heads. With a graceful but firm voice she said, "Excuse me, may I have a word?" The hall fell almost silent. Madame Kem walked toward the couple's parents, her eyes sharp but calm. She smiled first, but her words carried weight. "This wedding is beautiful, no doubt. The decorations, the music, the food. It is all grand. But tell me, who is responsible for the gowns we are all admiring today?" The mother straightened her shoulders proudly. "Our daughter Amarachi sewed them," she said quickly, hoping to claim glory from it. Madame Kem nodded. "Yes, Amarachi. I've been watching her. The gowns are elegant, well-stitched, better than what I see in many fashion houses across the city. Yet I notice something strange. The one with the real talent, the one whose hands made this day more beautiful, stands in the shadows while you all celebrate another." The parents shifted uncomfortably, but Madame Kem continued, her voice stronger. "I also notice how she is treated, ignored, dismissed, called selfish when she sacrifices the most. Tell me, why is her gift not honored? Why do you treat your jewel as if she is nothing?" Murmurs spread across the hall. Guests began to whisper to one another, their eyes turning toward Amarachi, who stood frozen at the edge of the crowd. Her face burned with shame and shock, but also with a deep ache, because someone had finally spoken what she had been too afraid to say. Madame Kem did not stop there. She raised her voice slightly so all could hear. "I will say this without fear. Amarachi has more skill, more grace, and more dignity than this entire decorated wedding. You should be lifting her high, not crushing her dreams. A daughter like her is the true honor of any family." The crowd erupted in agreement. Some clapped, some nodded, others murmured, "It is true, it is true." Eyes turned sharply toward the parents, whose smiles had disappeared. Their pride now looked like shame, their shoulders heavy under the judgment of the crowd. For the first time that day, Amarachi's parents could not hide behind music and noise. They stood there, exposed and uncomfortable, while their forgotten daughter stood in silence, her worth finally spoken out loud for all to hear. When the last drumbeat faded and the guests began to leave, Amarachi sat quietly in a corner of the compound. The wedding was over, the noise had died down, but her heart still felt heavy. She watched her sister surrounded by gifts and praises, while her parents walked proudly around as if they had won a crown. Amarachi, as always, was invisible. She wanted to slip away silently, but a gentle voice called her name. "Amarachi," Madame Kem said, walking toward her with calm steps and kind eyes. "My dear, may I speak with you?" Amarachi stood quickly, nervous. "Yes, ma." Madame Kem smiled, though her gaze was serious. "I have been watching you all day. I saw the gowns you made, I saw the work of your hands. And I also saw the strength in your eyes, even when no one else cared to notice. You have something special, Amarachi. A gift." The young woman's heart raced. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. She lowered her eyes, her voice soft. "Thank you, ma. But I am just a local seamstress." Madame Kem shook her head firmly. "No, you are not just anything. You are an artist. What you have is bigger than this town, bigger than the shadows they try to put you in. I own a fashion house in Enugu. If you are willing, I want you to work with me. I will mentor you, teach you, and when the time is right, help you start your own brand." Amarachi's lips parted in shock. She stared at the older woman, hardly believing the words. A job in Enugu, working in a real fashion house. It was everything she had dreamed of, everything she had prayed for on lonely nights while counting her savings. Her throat tightened with emotion, and her eyes filled with tears. "Ma," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Are you truly saying this to me? After everything I have lost, you are offering me hope again?" Madame Kem placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Yes, my dear. You may have been ignored here, but the world will not ignore you. Your dreams are still alive." The tears Amarachi had been holding back spilled freely. She covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed with gratitude. For the first time in months, she felt a light breaking into her darkness. The betrayal of her parents still hurt, the wound was still deep, but now there was a path forward, a chance to rise, to prove that her sacrifices had not been in vain. That night, as Amarachi lay in bed, she no longer stared at the empty wooden box with despair. Instead, she whispered to herself, "My story is not over. This is only the beginning." And for the first time in a long time, she fell asleep with hope in her heart. Months passed, and the story of Amarachi began to change. In Enugu, under Madame Kem's guidance, her talent bloomed like a flower long hidden in the shade. She worked day and night, learning new designs, sewing with finer fabrics, and creating clothes that turned heads wherever they were worn. Soon, people from across the region began to ask for Amarachi's touch. Her name started to travel faster than she ever imagined. One afternoon, Amarachi returned to Nsukka, not as the tired seamstress who once sat in the shadows, but as a confident young businesswoman. She arrived in a car from the fashion house, dressed in one of her own elegant designs. The neighbors rushed to greet her, their voices filled with pride. "That is Amarachi, the one whose designs are now admired everywhere." Children pointed at her with wide eyes, and even the same relatives who once whispered cruel words now spoke her name with admiration. Inside the house, her parents sat quietly, unable to hide their shame. They remembered the day they emptied her wooden box, the way they dismissed her tears, the way they called her selfish. Now they were staring at the very child who had brought real honor to their family, not through a wedding, but through her own hard work and dignity. Amarachi looked at them, her heart heavy but calm. She had every reason to be bitter, yet she chose a different path. She forgave them, for she knew carrying anger would only weigh her down. But deep inside she also knew she would never forget. Their betrayal had shaped her, but it had not broken her. That day, Amarachi stood tall, not just as a daughter, but as living proof that true honor is never stolen, only earned.